Sort of, the chairs are sort of spread out. Right. You want to move that chair, I can do a chair. Is that too? It doesn't matter. Okay. And I'll let you know to sit by the chair. Well, okay. So we move chairs. Yeah, we're just try to do social distance. And here's a chair here. Okay.
Sharon Toporek, go on to God. Oh God. O God, your ways often mystify us, yet without you we would feel cast away in a desolate void. You give us the will to live, you grieve with us, and teach us compassion for the suffering. You send your messengers, our friends, who take our hand and walk with us in our sorrow. You lead us from darkness toward the light. We who are destined to die revere the God who keeps us alive. Life and death come from you, and the soul returns to you. We live on too in those we love, surviving in their thoughts and in their deeds. God, we live on in your eternal care. We praise you, O truthful judge. We praise you, O compassionate parent. God gave, God took away. Blessed be the name of God. This past Shabbat, we read of the passing of one generation, of Abraham and Sarah, the first patriarch and matriarch of the Torah. While the reading begins with the death of Sarah, it concludes with a remarkable moment at Abraham's funeral. his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, come together to honor their father, burying him together. Abraham is held up in Judaism, venerated even, as the first individual who has a personal relationship with God. He's supposed to set an example for us, be a role model on what it means to have that relationship with God and to live a righteous life. In some ways, he absolutely does this. In other ways, he fails. Some of those failures are because of his own shortcomings as a human, and others are out of his control. One of the greatest challenges that he faced in his lifetime was that of the relationship with his two eldest sons, Ishmael and Isaac. And it's why the scene of them standing together to bury their father is so remarkable and touching. Abraham may have been an example of what it meant to have a relationship with God, but for him, being a parent was a different story. He expelled his first son Ishmael into the wilderness as an infant, providing him with no food or water. Were it not for the intervention of an angel, Ishmael would have never survived childhood. Ishmael is just that, a child, the last time he speaks to his father. Isaac, on the other hand, has a relationship with his father into his years as a young adult. And then the unimaginable happens. Abraham binds Isaac, places him on an altar for sacrifice. Yet once again, his son, this time Isaac, survives because an angel intercedes. And once again, it's the last time that a parent and child speak to one another. And yet, despite the strained and challenging relationship between Abraham and his sons, they honor their father and their family in this moment of generational change. Sharon Mendelson was born into a life of privilege, a true Charlestonian family. Her family owned a store on King Street, which had started as a hat shop and evolved into a women's clothing store. Her childhood was blessed. She had everything a little girl could desire. She was loved, spoiled even, by her parents, and life was good. Her young, charmed life continued, meeting the boy that she would eventually marry when she was just 14 years old. Brenda, we talked about this a few moments ago, but last night you commented that I probably hadn't spoken with anyone who knew your mother because of my short time here in Charleston. And you were right. Before yesterday, I hadn't spoken to many people, or to people about your mother. But after our conversation, I went and I called a couple people from the old guard, as you put it, those who knew your mother and who had grown up with her. Each conversation began the exact same way, and I think it was even the exact same way that you had started our conversation. Sharon was the most beautiful girl there was. She and Julian were a real-life Barbie and Ken, just gorgeous. She was married by the time she was 20, and although it only lasted 11 years, it gave her the two greatest blessings of her life, Brian and Brenda. In her life, Sharon had many blessings. She was smart. She excelled in school. She was accepted to Vanderbilt University. We were just talking again by the cars of how many different beauty, I don't want to say clubs, but beauty groups she was part of because of how both smart and beautiful she was. She had a sense of humor that could lead to fits of laughter that seemed to never end. And her laugh was simply the best. Hearing it could only bring a smile to your face, fill your soul with joy. Most of all, though, she adored her children and grandchildren. There is nothing which Sharon was capable of doing that she wouldn't have done for them. Sharon was also challenged in her life, though. Shortly after Brian was born, she began her battle with mental illness. It's something that came to dominate her life, and in a way, stole much of it from her and her family. Shortly after the divorce, Sharon moved herself and the kids to Atlanta to be closer to her sister Eve. Eve. Thank God for Eve. Like the angel that interceded on behalf of Ishmael and Isaac, Eve was there for the children and for Sharon. She helped take care of the family, making sure that Sharon was where she needed to be in order to receive the care that she needed throughout her life. While there were pieces of her illness that she could control, there was also a great deal that she couldn't. And, as it is with most mental illnesses, it meant that often it was Brian and Brenda who had to take care of her and of each other. Even after Brenda left for Atlanta, the siblings remained close, often talking, being there to support one another when needed. Much of Sharon Mendelsohn Toporek's life was taken from her. The relationships that should have been the closest were instead often the most strained. It's something that those who cared for her can only wish that they could have done more, taken away her struggle, removed the unfair and unjust illness that robbed everyone of so much. Well, there may have been nothing that could have been done. There were bright spots, moments when things seemed great, seemed normal. Sharon loved being social and going out. Before COVID hit, she and a caretaker would often go out to restaurants to eat multiple times a week. She was a sort of social butterfly where she lived. It made it all that much harder when first two broken hips at the end of last year, and then the pandemic restricted her ability to have visitors, to go out, to do what she loved. Yet despite it all, she soldiered through. Another bright spot in these final months was the final time that Brenda and Sharon spoke. Any other day, Sharon would have complained about where she lived, the food, the weather. But this time, the conversation was pleasant, peaceful, positive. It ended as it always did, with Sharon saying, "I love you." And for the first time in a long time, Brenda was able to respond in kind, with a sense of connection and appreciation for her mother and their relationship. Today we've come together to honor our mother, our sister, cousin, friend, grandmother. We stand here together to give comfort and support to one another, but also to honor Sharon, to remember the good moments and acknowledge the challenges. Like Isaac and Ishmael at their father's grave, this moment teaches us about the strength, love, and power of family. Though it may not have always been easy, though the struggles may have been unfair, we're grateful for the life that Sharon lived, for the laughter that she added to our lives, for showing us what it means to be family. May the memory of Sharon Mendelsohn Toporek, Shena Bat Moshe Yosef Vefreudel be for a blessing. I'd like to now call on Larry Needle, who also has a few words. Will be followed by Brian.
Thank you, Rabbi. And I will be very brief because of your beautiful remarks and what Brian has to say as well. But I think when the final chapter is written, it will be said that she did as well as she could have done under the circumstances. And it truly was, in some sense, a blessing from God. If you had gone back and you had looked at the trajectory of her life and the difficulties of dealing with Sharon on a day-to-day basis, you learn that mental illness is so unbelievably difficult for the entire family. not just for Sharon, but dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. And yet, somehow, despite it all, she lived as well as she could have, thanks to Brian, who, as a financial wizard, managed her finances. It was like the miracle, the jars of oil that lasted in the ancient temple day. Brian made that money from her family, from her dad, last forever. It was amazing. And as it was said, Eve, thank God for Eve, got her into the Jewish tower and the Jewish home, which was a blessing. She loved all of the Jewish events at the synagogue, at the Jewish home, participated in them, and it was a blessing. And Brenda, on a day-to-day basis, dealt with her mom and her needs. And despite the fact that on a day-to-day basis, there was so much trial and tribulation and difficulties, in the very end, she died in the most peaceful manner possible, which was truly a blessing. Despite everything that went on a day-to-day basis, her body just basically gave out. But she did not suffer, other than the mental illness, from a long illness or battle. She was not treated for a cancer, God forbid, or anything like that. Rather, her body just gave out. And to me, that's truly a miracle, just as the fact she's buried here in Emanu-El Synagogue, here in Maryville, where her grandchildren will be able to visit her grave right behind her parents. She's not that far from her former husband, Julian, that you mentioned. Close, but not too close, which is just perfect. But I hope that the children, the grandchildren, who did not always see her in the best of times, will recall that she, as you mentioned, she worshiped those grandchildren. Got a tremendous amount of pride in their accomplishments, loved to talk with them all the time and to hear the voice, and would have given them the shirt off her back, whatever she had. And that's who she truly was. So I hope that the children will remember that for the rest of their lives. The grandchildren will remember as they visit her grave. And may her memory be for a blessing. Thank you.
Larry is also always a tough act to follow. My mom had a very difficult life. That's no secret. Anyone who knew her for any length of time during her adult life understands this. Bipolar disorder is a difficult affliction. It affects people differently. Many people are able to deal with it well and function normally. Some cannot. Mom was, unfortunately, one of the ones who struggled with it most of her adult life. It was heartbreaking to see someone you love have to suffer through something like that. But Mom was a fighter. She was determined not to let it get the best of her, and she faced it with courage, and she battled against it every single day. Sometimes she won, and she would have good days. Other times, bipolar won, and she would have it rough. To her credit, despite her daily battles, she managed to live independently up until the last few years of her life. In spite of everything she was up against, Mom was a person who overflowed with love for others, for her family, her friends, and truly most everyone she ever met. She absolutely adored her 5 grandchildren, and she wished circumstances would have allowed her to spend more time with all of them. She loved going to Columbia on the bus to visit Brenda, Larry, Evie, Betty, and Rose. And she looked forward to coming to our house for dinner to visit with Dawn, Aaron, Adam, and me, particularly at the holidays. And she especially loved Chick-fil-A sandwiches. Many times when I took her home after a dinner visit, I had to stop at a Chick-fil-A and get a couple of sandwiches for her to put in her fridge for a later snack. And she was always disappointed when she'd visit on a Sunday when Chick-fil-A was closed. When she was well, Mom had a wonderful sense of humor, an infectious laugh, and an incredible smile. And she had an enormous heart. She was incredibly generous, sometimes to a fault. She loved giving gifts to people, even if she couldn't afford it. I've never seen anyone derive so much pleasure from giving than Mom. She would have given her last dime as a gift. She got that much joy out of it. The last time I spoke to Mom a couple of weeks ago, she asked me to send her some money so she could do something nice for the staff who took care of her at the home. I could hear the nurse in the background scolding Mom and saying, "Sharon, that's very nice, but you know we can't accept that." But that didn't matter to Mom. She wanted to do it anyway. When Mom was young, she loved horseback riding, and she was very good at it. She made Brenda and me take horseback riding lessons and compete in shows at the stable here in Charleston. Brenda was much better at it than I was. I enjoyed riding on the trails, but I hated the shows. But even at such a young age, I could see Mom's passion for riding and how happy it made her, and I was thankful that she shared that with us. In Mom's room at the home, there was a picture on her nightstand from the Charleston newspaper that was taken when she was just 18 years old. She was running and splashing in the surf at Sullivan's Island with a big smile on her face. She was gorgeous and radiant and carefree and happy. I have this picture on my phone, and I will look at it often because it's a picture of Mom at her very best, and that's how I want to remember her. If there is a positive about Mom's passing, it's that her suffering is finally at an end. I pray that God has opened up his arms and is giving Mom a big hug, the love she deserves, and hopefully all the Chick-fil-A sandwiches she could ever want.
I'm not one to judge, but I think you followed Larry well.
Thank you.
We rise for the El Maleh Rachamim prayer, the prayer that helps escort Sharon's soul from this world into the next. El Maleh Rachamim shochen baromim hametzeh menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina במעלות קדושים מטורים כזוהר רק ימזירים את נשמת שנה בת משה יוסף אפרוידל שלחה לעולמה בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתה אנא בעל הרחמים הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Sharon Toporek, Shena Bat Moshe Yosef V'Freudel, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We're seated for a moment. Before the opportunity to say Mourner's Kaddish for the first time, we have one more ritual, one more act, which we do for Sharon. It is one of the greatest acts of chesed, of kindness that we can do, which is just as the prayer that we just said helps escort her soul from this world to the next, we help return her body to the ground from which it came. And so I'll invite Brenda and Brian up to the grave with me for a moment, where we'll place at least 3 shovelfuls of earth into the grave. And again, one of those we use, for one of those shovelfuls, we use the back of the shovel. Again, just as we paused coming up here to show that it was a difficult moment, we use the back of the shovel again because it's a difficult moment, because the world feels off in this moment. After Brian and Brenda have their opportunity, we'll invite the rest of we're all family here, but we'll invite the rest of the family and then everyone else to participate in this mitzvah, in this great act of chesed. And then the rest of us, after the family as well, can participate in this and perform that final act of chesed, of kindness for Sharon. We rise for the mourner's Kaddish, the first opportunity to say it in Sharon's memory, as well as to stand with the family for comfort. We say together, Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen, Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam umei omaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei dekudesha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. And as we move forward from this moment, as we move into the next stage of this family's life, of course, again, wish our condolences and our comfort to Brian, to Brenda, to the entire family, to all of us that are here this afternoon. I'm going to ask that if you're not immediate family, grandkids included, but that if you're not immediate family, that we're going to make 2 rows on either side of the path, right where the gentlemen over there are standing. That we will help escort the family away from this moment, so that no matter which way they look, to the right, to the left, in front of them or behind them, they see that they're surrounded by those who love them.